back to Evergreen Perspective Season 2. This season, we're switching things up a little bit. We're bringing on guests. We're people out there doing the work, making decisions, and shaping the future of our community, which means I'm no longer just talking to myself in a room for an hour. My kids are relieved. They were starting to think I was running for most likely to monologue to my treadmill that sits outside of my podcast studio here. We've got a new format, a little more conversation, a little more storytelling, and hopefully even more fun. So, the goal still remains the same. We're still looking at issues shaping our community here in Washington State and beyond. We're going to try to cut through the noise and get to the heart of what really matters. So we're still going to have clear, honest conversations about issues affecting our lives. We're still going to have good substance, hopefully even more laughs. We're still, and out there somewhere, there's still a committee meeting about a committee that's going to recommend another committee. So democracy in action. So all is good. But the truth is, the people making decisions at the local level are often the ones having the biggest impact on our actual day-to-day lives, which is why I'm excited about our first guest of the season, Clark County Councilmember Wil Fuentes. Let's a little bit of information about Wil here. Wil's journey is rooted in the community. He was raised by a single parent in a low-income neighborhood in Long Beach, California. He moved to the PNW about 20 years ago, where he earned his bachelor's degree from Portland State University and later a master's degree from Western Oregon. Over the last 15 years, he's built a career leading across nonprofits, higher education, banking, always with the focus on strengthening the communities. Before joining Clark County Council, Wil served 5 years as a planning commissioner over in Hillsboro, Oregon, and worked on multiple committees tackling affordable housing, climate policy, and economic development. Now he's not only just shaping policy, he's on the ground as an operations manager at Fourth Plane Forward, where he's helping empower community members through financial education, workshops, low interest rate loans for small businesses, and coordinating nonprofits' first housing development project. Super cool. So with that, I'd like to welcome you to Season 2 of Evergreen Perspective, and let's bring on Wil Fuentes. All right. Here we are, Evergreen Perspective. Welcome. As you just heard Wil's background, we're stoked to have him here. This is council person. Is that the appropriate terminology?
Counselor. Or council member. I mean, I can go either way.
Yeah. So council person Wil Fuentes, Clark County Councilor District 3. So those of you who don't know out there, in Clark County, we have county districts, right? So how did that come about? Do you know when the districts got, how do we get 5 districts?
That's a really good question. Actually, I don't know how. I know that these districts have been in place for quite some time. I don't know its history. They do get slightly changed every 10 years, if I'm not mistaken, to make sure that they're proportionate to the population. My district, District 3, which is the same district you're in, is essentially 205, 192nd to the east, down to the Columbia River, and then along Fourth Plane Boulevard. And so most of it is in the city of Vancouver. There are about 10,000 people living in unincorporated Clark County within my district. But I guess to answer your question, no, I don't know how the districts came about, how long we've had 5, but it's been some time.
Yeah, very well.
Yeah.
I found it interesting. You look at the districts, how they're drawn.
Mm-hmm.
And, obviously this 3rd district is very dense comparatively to the other 4 districts, right? The other ones they got a lot of landmass, but the people are kind of spread out, and there's a lot of dense area where there's just not people living.
Yeah. District 3 is the smallest in terms of size. It is the smallest, but it's got about the same population as every other district. But to your point, it is definitely smaller, more compact, which is nice, right? When we're out putting up signs, when we're out door knocking, it's a much more smaller geographic area, and so we don't have to spend a heck of a lot on signs because there's not a lot of area to cover.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think for the viewers that don't know, I am on the ballot this coming November. I'm in District 3 as well. I'm running for county charter, so I'm in the same district, so I can definitely relate to that. It is a little bit easier to kind of deploy signs, and I think door
Hmm.
knocking is a little bit easier. I haven't gone out and done any door knocking yet.
Hmm.
I do plan on doing some door knocking soon, but one thing at a time.
Yeah,
Still a
absolutely.
little early. We'll get there though.
Yeah, it's
Um,
we got about 3 more months,
yeah,
but you will definitely want to get out there before the rain, right? Before it starts raining, and then spend some time out there talking to community members. We're fortunate that we have a lot of great people in our community in this district, and people are engaged, they're involved, and they care. So.
yeah. So when I opened the show, I talked a little bit about your background, obviously,
Hmm.
and with that. I was kind of curious to know, you spent some time on a planning commission, right,
Hmm.
over in Hillsborough.
Yeah.
Um, how has that experience kind of prepared you for your transition to the role as a counselor in the county?
Yeah, no, that's a really, really good question. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I spent 5 years, almost 5 years, maybe 2 months shy of 5 years on the Planning Commission in the city of Hillsborough. I just got my degree. I went back to college as an adult, got my degree in community development. I wanted to be a planner, a city planner. I wanted to understand what it involved, and decide whether or not I was going to get my master's in urban and regional planning. So I decided to sit on the Planning Commission. Learned a heck of a lot in terms of land use planning, right? And after 5 years, I stepped down, got my master's, but not in urban and regional planning. I realized that planners spend a lot of time researching, which is great. It's absolutely necessary. And that's just not my style. I rather be out engaging with community members, right?
Did
Talk.
you, I'm sorry to interrupt, did you want to be like a city manager? Was that
City
kind
planner,
of
an urban
the
planner.
role you wanted to go, right? Okay.
That's yeah. That was kind of the plan. But after I remember the very first day I sat on the planning commission in Hillsborough, and they bring out, and I asked them to print out the staff report, and they bring out like 500 pages, and I'm like, who puts this together? Well, they're like, well, the planners. I'm like, this is not what I want to do. I don't want to put this stuff together. I want to be out there engaging with community members and figuring out how to solve problems. And so I decided not to go that direction. I did get my master's in organizational leadership instead, and moved on this side of the river, right? And so to answer your question, how does it inform, my being a counselor? It does a lot. Again, going back to land use planning, understanding maps, right? Understanding, the challenges both in incorporated and unincorporated Clark County. I think that really, really, really helps. We get a lot of issues that come to the plant to the council that have to do with land use, right? Whether it's agricultural, resource lands, or other types of land use issues. And having sat on the planning commission, having that background in community development really, really helps. Makes a big difference, I think.
Yeah, and I don't want to jump into the big boys just yet, but I think we should since we're kind of here. One of the biggest points I think that continues to be not just locally focused, but I mean it's kind of the U.S. total, right? We
Hmm.
have a housing shortage, or maybe we don't have a housing shortage. I'd like to get your thoughts on it a little bit when you start digging deep into housing. Obviously, we have an affordable housing crisis,
Hmm.
I would say, and I don't think you'd find too many people to disagree with that. I don't. Maybe we would, but I think when we talk about housing, do we have a housing crisis or do we have an affordable housing crisis? Because there's people with multiple homes and et cetera. How do you think that affects our area?
I think it's a combination of both, right? We live in a county that people want to live in. I'm one of those that made the jump from across the river, right, from Oregon to Vancouver for the same reason that a lot of people are showing up at your county for access to housing that is more affordable than in Seattle, than in California, than in Portland. And so I think it is a combination of both the shortage and access to housing that is affordable to all community members, right? People are living longer And so boomers, for example, baby boomers are living a lot longer. They're staying around, sticking around in their house a lot longer. And they can't just sell because trying to buy a house is also out of reach for them, right? So they stay in place. And young people are struggling, to pay rent, to access housing that they can afford. And so I think it's a combination of both. Not enough housing supply in a region that's in high demand because people want to live here, and then of course access to housing that is affordable, right? The prices have shot up significantly since COVID. Huge. I mean, I remember like in 2011, I first moved to Hillsborough. A couple years after the housing bubble burst, I was able to buy a brand new condo for $135,000, brand new, and then I sold it for almost twice as much 10 years later, which certainly benefited me, but it makes it difficult for other folks. And you're not going to find a condo, a two-bedroom. You're not going to find a one-bedroom condo for $135,000 anywhere anymore, right? Maybe in other parts of the country, but certainly not here in Clark County.
No, and I think you hit the nail on the head there. As a business owner and as a newer business owner a decade ago, I couldn't actually get a home loan as a new business owner because I didn't have established business, right? So they wanted me to be a business owner for 5 years as a self-employed business owner, while all my employees were enjoying the benefits of getting houses and were able to get mortgages. I wasn't able to do that because they're like, oh, sorry, you're out. So I got in this little wedge of a window where I couldn't quite buy yet. And then once I sold my business, I got in a position where I was ready to buy, and then COVID hit. And so I put an offer on, I think 6 homes at that time, and I started putting offers on homes I didn't even go look at. That's how, I was like, hey, I got to get something, and it's an issue. And now I'm a renter. So there you go.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely, you're absolutely right. The average price of a home in Clark County right now is about $535,000, right? I mean, they're not Seattle prices, thank goodness. They're not, Los Angeles, San Francisco prices. But homes have gone up 25-30% in the last 5 years. Incomes haven't, right?
The wages aren't the same here as they are in Seattle either.
Right, exactly. Yeah. But wages aren't increasing, as quickly as the as the price of housing, and so it's just becoming increasingly out of reach for a lot of folks, for a lot of community members, and so it definitely is a big issue. I think it's a significant issue that's going to have long-term impacts, right? Because we depend on our homes to create generational wealth, For sure. And a lot of young people aren't being able to access, a home that they can afford.
So, I guess with that said, right, we're trucking down this road here on the housing situation. What is it that the county level can do to help move, more affordable housing out there? Like, what can we do to help folks out there get into homes, so that they can try to live that, quote unquote American dream?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a couple of things, and this is what I campaigned on as well, was, increasing zoning density in parts of the urban growth area. So the urban space between the city of Vancouver and the urban growth area, so communities like Hazeldale, Valida, Salmon Creek, that's what we're responsible for. The county's responsible for that urban area. And so changing zoning codes to allow for higher density. There was a state law that passed, I think, earlier this year that requires counties to allow for multiple housing units in a lot. So duplex, triplex, fourplex. So we certainly want to encourage that and support that as well. So that if you have a 10,000 square foot acre, you can, build a couple more units if you want, right? And that is permissible. We are looking at potentially, councilmanically, a 0.1% sales tax to generate some revenue for affordable housing. right? And just to put it in perspective, yes, it is a sales tax increase slightly, but it's think of it this way: 1/10 of 1% is 10 cents on $100, right? 50 cents on $500. So if you go out and buy a $500 television, 50 cents out of that sales tax that you pay goes towards a fund that will allow for us to support organizations that are building affordable housing within Clark County.
Sure.
Yeah.
What do you feel like? What do you feel like as far as pushback goes? Because, um, when I say pushback, I mean, from, say the Realtors Association or
Mhm.
perhaps the Builders Association. Where's the pushback from these folks that maybe they don't quite support this, the structure of having higher density and, some focus on building affordable housing? Does it
Yeah.
seem like they're behind it, or does it seem like maybe they're like, nah, we're not really into that, or we may say we are, but we're really not going to do it.
Yeah, well, as a typical business, their end result is to generate as much profit as possible. And so what builders want is cheap land, right? And when you're in an urban area, land isn't as cheap as it is, if you were to drive out to, near Battleground or near Ridgefield, right? In those rural areas. So what they want is cheap land. They want the county to release more land to expand the urban growth areas around several jurisdictions, so that they can access cheaper land to develop, right? Sell the home and make a lot of profit. And so that's kind of where they stand, and I'm a big supporter of preserving our farmland, of preserving our open spaces, right? We have plenty of land. The urban growth area, for example, the Vancouver urban growth area is almost the size of the city of Vancouver. The city of Vancouver is 52 square miles. The urban growth area, another 50 or so square miles. There's plenty of land to build within the urban growth areas. There's plenty of land to build within the city of Vancouver. We're a low density city, right? We can build. There's a lot of infill, but land costs a little bit more. Sure, it has an impact on the cost of a home, but I think that if developers were more open to not necessarily making tons of profits, they might be able to build and give people an opportunity to access homes that are affordable.
Right. I think, something I've heard, out and about talking with some community members, especially in kind of more North County, is that what we're seeing some of up in that area is, somebody will sell a couple acres of land, and all of a sudden there's boom, these houses there, and there's zero infrastructure around these, right?
Right.
The roads didn't change. Now you got like, a lot of traffic, it's, and I feel like maybe some of it's NIMBYism, but I feel like maybe some of it might be justified in that maybe we didn't see far enough ahead, or we're not having that growth infrastructure where we got these neighborhoods popping up, and then we don't have the streets, roads, or the expansion pieces around that. What do you feel about that?
Well, and that's expensive. Infrastructure is very expensive, right? Having to build roads, having to build a sewer system, that extends beyond the urban areas is incredibly expensive. And at the end of the day, taxpayers are stuck with that bill. Right, we have to pay it. Developers aren't doing it. They want us to pay for that infrastructure so that they can build homes and sell them at a premium. I'm against that. There's a term. It's called like leapfrog development, and it's very common in cities like Las Vegas and Phoenix, where you have the actual city, your urban area, and then you go between. The city, and then there's like a big development, 20 miles outside the city, with a lot of open space in between, right? That's called leapfrog development, right? Because you're skipping, the immediate urban area to
Right.
build out in the boonies, and then again, it becomes very expensive because now you have to extend infrastructure 20, 30 miles out, and taxpayers are stuck with that bill. We have to pay for that. It's not the developer, we do.
Right. So I guess with that said, like, how do we do partnership with private industry, with county, to be like, hey, if you want to build out here, you're gonna have to be responsible for X dollars amount of this infrastructure, right? Because they want cheaper permitting, they want cheaper property, they want to have higher profit margins from their homes they sell, but it sounds like they want their cake and they want to eat it too, and they don't want to
Right.
pay for it along the way. How do we partner with that?
Yeah. Well, the good thing is in Clark County, in really in a lot of because of the urban, the UGA, the urban growth areas, that's not permissible. Leapfrog development isn't permissible. They can only build within the urban growth areas, right? Sure, there are open spaces within the urban growth areas, so you might see some of that where you see, for example, I don't know, Hazeldale, right? And then 2 miles, down the street, it's pretty rural, but that's still within the urban growth area, so that's where they can build. And so that's one of the great things, about the urban growth area. That doesn't allow that type of development, right? Which would increase, of course, the cost of doing business because of having to build infrastructure, not just building it, but then we also have to maintain it, right? So there's that, and so I think I think the city of Vancouver and other jurisdictions are doing this where they are waiving certain fees, development fees, for builders so that they can, speed up the process. The city of Vancouver has done a really good job of streamlining the permitting process, right? It could take 3 months, where in Clark County it takes up to 6 months to get a project approved, right? And I know that the county is working on that, and in fact they've done a good job. Of speeding up that process, bringing it down from like 9 months down to 6 months, and hopefully we can streamline it to continue to be able to make it easy for folks. If you want to build a couple of houses on your property or develop a large lot, to speed up the process of building homes. But I think those are things that we can do at the county level. Waive some of those fees. Figure out, to your point, right? Negotiate. How can we partner up together with a developer to be able to pay for the infrastructure, right? If the infrastructure isn't there. How open are the builders to want to do that? I mean, I don't know. I don't get to negotiate that, but we can certainly give direction at the council to do that.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I had this campaign I'm in. I was reached out to by the Realtors Association and the Builders Association, and I don't think they enjoyed my answers as much as maybe they did some other people's answers.
Yeah.
I've always been a firm believer in people over profit.
Absolutely.
I think there's plenty of profit to go around, but I think if we're exploiting those people, I think you're going to run out of people to exploit at some point. At some point there's a finite cap there that reaches a saturation point of, we don't have enough money to say buy, and you got no incentive to sell, so now you don't have a business any longer, right? And so I think what we see a lot of, and especially in the business and the building industries, we see a lot of short-term thought process without a lot of down-the-road thinking. How can I build out this 4 acres as quick and as fast and as profitable as I can and just move on? And all the rest of the infrastructure development, ongoing maintenance, be damned. I don't care because I'm out of here.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. In fact, they didn't endorse me either. The realtors didn't endorse me. The building industry BIA did not endorse me either. They endorsed my opponent. I still won, and they put out a lot of money towards the last month of the campaign. I forgot what the term was, but they spent money on ads, right? They didn't go directly to my opponent. They just put ads against me. Didn't work for them. But they weren't happy with my answers either. And I, like you, it's humans over profit. To your point, there is plenty of money to go around. Here's the thing: these developers, it's not like they're out there using union labor, that pays really well. They're paying folks, $20 an hour to put up a structure, and so they're making money. I'm pretty sure, plenty of money.
I'm pretty sure they're doing okay.
Yeah.
I mean, if they weren't, I think they would probably be looking for something else to do, would be my guess.
Right. That's exactly it. Yeah.
I guess with that said, how big a role does the council play specifically, in your opinion, I guess, on, helping to streamline the permitting process or being able to waive these processes? Is that something that the city council can do, or does that come from a different office or a different structure?
Well, it's through our planning department, so community planning department. Dr. Oriaco, Oliver Oriaco, who's been the head of that department for quite some time, has been with the county for 30 years, knows the process like the back of his hand. Really, really smart guy. And so we can provide direction, right? We can spend time with, I just spent an hour about a month or so ago with the permitting department. I wanted to understand what their process looked like. Unfortunately, at that time, their manager transitioned out of the county. And so I don't know if the position has been filled yet, but yeah, we can certainly influence, by checking out what their processes looked at, having conversations with community planning and permitting, and making suggestions and recommendations on what could help. Right. The great thing about the community planning department is that it's staffed with incredibly smart people that know what they're doing. And they're working on solutions, right? Trying to streamline that process. Like I said earlier, I think it took like 9 months to a year for permits on average. Now it's down to 6, or 6 months or something like that. And they continue to identify processes to improve, to streamline it. So little by little, it's getting done.
Right. I guess that begs the question a little bit for me is like, why did it take so long to begin with, and why did it have to be set to be such a priority? If it could be done in 6 and it was being done in 9, why wasn't it always done in 6? And
Right.
why are we working to get into 3? And if we're into 3, why are we not working to get it turned around in less time than that, right? Years and years ago, long time ago, I was able to build a house from the sticks, from flat lot up, and the biggest thing that took longest, right, was in between inspections. You get one set done and then you needed another inspection. And I mean, do we have enough inspectors to do the work? Is that an issue as far as like having people to do the inspections and the jobs? Does that seem to be holding up the process?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know that I have a direct answer, but what I will say is, in conversations with a lot of department heads, that the county's understaffed. The county has grown significantly in the last couple of decades, but staff has pretty much, the number of staff has stayed the same. And so that does pose a challenge. But they find ways, to streamline processes utilizing technology, right? Technology that's out there. Why it's taken so long, that's a good question. I've not been around the county too long to understand why that is, but it's a good question to ask. But I think as technology advances, artificial intelligence advances, there might be ways to utilize that technology to streamline a process even more, right? To make things a lot faster. As far as inspectors are, I don't know if we're understaffed, if we have enough, but that's a good question to go back and ask. So now I'm taking notes because that's exactly what I'm going to do.
There you go. I like it.
Yeah.
So I guess backing up a little bit, because we kind of just got into this housing pipeline, but I want to go back just a little bit. What was it that made you want to run for public office?
Yeah, the good old, yeah. That's the most important, the most asked question.
What is it? Like, what is?
Yeah,
it?
what is it? Yeah, absolutely. So I've been working in the private sector most of my life, and it wasn't until about a little bit over 2 years now. In fact, July 30th was my 2-year anniversary at Fourth Plane Forward. I currently work for a nonprofit, an operations manager there, and I get to do a lot of things there. But most importantly, I get to engage with community members, right? And as I started talking to folks, understanding some of the challenges on the ground, the opportunity. I've always wanted to run for local office. I wanted to wait a little bit longer, and I wanted to run for city council. But in the future, once I was fully embedded in the community and understood exactly what was going on. But politics is about opportunities, right? This was an open seat in District 3. The councilor at that time wasn't going to run for re-election. She ran only for one term, and she was done with that. And so I did my due diligence. Well, and I wanted to solve problems, right, at a higher level, right? Going back to understanding land use, understanding the challenges through conversations with community members, and housing, with homelessness, and lack of engagement from community members. This opportunity came up, and I did my due diligence, spent about 3 months talking to people, talking to community leaders, talking to local politicians, talking to county, to determine if whether or not this was the right move for me. I knew that I wanted to do something. I wanted to have an impact. I wanted to affect change. both through my professional experience and working at the nonprofit. And in 3 months, I decided this is the best time for me to do it again. Politics is about opportunities, open seat. Why not give it a shot?
Sure.
I got a lot of great support from community members. I was very, very fortunate in that respect. And that helped, and I raised a lot of money, and we raised $80,000, which I believe is the most that's been raised for this particular seat. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it does take time.
Well, I know.
It does take time, right? And so I guess, all to say, I really care about, I haven't been here for too long, and most people know that, right? I've been here in Vancouver for 4 years. But I knew the moment I moved here, my best friend used to live across the street. The moment I moved here, I knew that this is where I was going to set root. This is where I would live the rest of my life, because I fell in love with this community. I fell in love with my job as a nonprofit operations manager. And, what better thing to do than, work towards improving the lives of my neighbors, so that's what happened, and here I am, sitting on council, and I'm excited. I love the job. It's a lot of work, but my favorite part is talking to people, engaging, and listening.
Yeah, I think I think you do a good job with community engagement. Obviously, I'm out in the community a lot too, and I think wherever I am, I look over and it seems like there you are. So. And I imagine you're at things that I'm not, so that means you're doing a whole lot, from that standpoint. But, I also wouldn't say, it's a prereq to have to live someplace, for too very long. I mean, we just look at the last couple of congressional races, right? We got people that don't live here at all, just move in and just run for office here.
Right.
All right, like we got coming up here soon. I just heard that a gentleman that doesn't live in our district is planning on running. So, hey, there you go.
Yeah, it happens. It does. Unfortunately, it happens. I especially for Congress, I hope, I wish that there were rules around that. But yeah, my intention wasn't to run right away. I really wanted to get embedded. But again, going back to politics is about opportunities. I don't know, if that chance of an open seat would come up again if I didn't run this time, right? And I am committed to Vancouver. I hardly ever go across. I have plenty of friends across the river, but I avoid it like the plague because it's just, everything's here. We have a wonderful urban community. We have some great trails. I spend 3-4 times a week in the summer walking the trails around Lacamas Lake. And that's only a 15-minute drive. Where else can I accomplish that? And I work with a group of great people at the nonprofit, at the council, and I mean, it's an amazing place.
Yeah.
Why it wasn't here sooner? I don't know.
Yeah, I think I've spent, I don't know, hundreds of hours running around, Round Lake and Lacamas Lake and Fallen Leaf and all that area. It's a little amazing little chunk of paradise there. But speaking of getting across, going to Portland, this is a good segue to get into, a little something we call the bridge project, right?
The Interstate Bridge replacement, yep.
Yeah, this continues to be quite the albatross, if you would, maybe even. This is a project that's been in the works for maybe a couple decades.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I feel like we had gotten it down here to maybe the 5-yard line, to use a football analogy. As a youth football coach, I like to use football analogies. So, we're down here at the 5-yard line, and nobody can decide what play to run. I know that you currently sit on the board, right?
The C-Tram board, yeah.
So I guess one question I have, and you can feel free to expand and take this wherever you want to go with it, but I failed to fully, how did whether we have a light rail or not have a light rail become such a hardline partisan issue, and where did that come from?
That's a fantastic question. When I started learning about, the Interstate Bridge replacement well before I started running for office, but I was kind of blown away of how controversial a very much needed piece of infrastructure was. And you're right. This has been ongoing for about 2 decades, 25, almost 30 years probably, since I moved to the region. That was something it was called the Columbia River Crossing at that time, right? And we in both states spent and wasted a lot of money to do research, and nothing happened, right? They didn't budge. The biggest issue now, and a lot of people were against the bridge originally, right? There was a group of people that didn't want the bridge. They didn't want the bridge, too much money. It was going to include tolls, etc. And then they were fine with that, right? Because now they had something else to fight against, which was the light rail, right? And so when both states started negotiating a few years ago, part of the plan that the federal government would support funding included light rail, right? They wanted to make sure that it included light rail.
So the federal, so let me just to clarify for viewers and listeners, the light rail was mandated in order to get the federal funding dollars.
Right.
And without the federal funding dollars, there is no bridge at all.
That is correct. That is absolutely correct. Yeah, that's exactly correct. And so, it adds $2 billion more to the price of the bridge. It is an expensive piece of infrastructure. We certainly won't argue that, and taxpayers at the end of the day pay for it, right? But in people who are against the light rail make arguments about it being a crime rail, about Vancouver becoming Portland, about bringing more drugs and crime, to this side of the river, which, by the way, they're already crossing. If crime wants to come here, if drugs want to come here, there's plenty of drugs in Vancouver and Clark County. They're already here. We don't need light rail for that,
Right.
And then of course, there's the components you mentioned sitting on CTRAN, right? The collaboration between CTRAN and TriMet, in ensuring that we pay our part once that light rail crosses the bridge, that we pay for the operations and maintenance. And a lot of folks are against that as well. It'll cost approximately $10 per taxpayer a year, for operations and maintenance. We haven't committed to that yet. We are negotiating with TriMet, but people push against that. I think, Ben, and I support. Here's the thing. I support light rail 100%. Right. This region, Portland is going to grow. The Portland metropolitan area is going to grow 500,000 people over the next 20 years. We are expected to grow 200,000 people over the next 20 years. So that's 700,000 people. Right. We'll be at a metro area of 3 million folks in 20 years. That's what's forecasted. Right. That's a lot of people to accommodate. Right. We cannot add more lanes to the interstate, even if it's a new bridge. We just can't add more lanes, because where do those lanes go, right? You can add 6 lanes going in each direction, but they're not supported on the other side of the river, right? Once you cross the river into Oregon, it's 3 lanes each way. You can't expand the freeways, and add more lanes. There's just no way of doing that. And even if there was, it would cost billions and billions and billions of dollars, because you'd be displacing a lot of communities, right?
Yeah.
And so we need to find a way to move people around. TriMet is struggling right now. I don't think they've done a really good job of managing some of the challenges that they're experiencing with crime on their trains, and so they've seen a reduction in ridership over the last few years. They're cutting lines, they're cutting routes, and so they're struggling. But that's now, I think about, the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years, right? And this light rail, this bridge is going to be around for that long. So I'm not thinking about today, when I think about the importance of integrating light rail into this project, I'm also thinking about the future, and I'm hoping that people will be more open, when this bridge is completed, to utilize light rail, right? Public transportation. So, but that's kind of the big controversy, And I think that Clark County is interesting because a lot of folks that have been here a very long time are afraid. It's changing. Sure. Clark County is changing really, really, really fast. I remember coming here 15 years ago for the first time to the only Wiener Schnitzel that was out here. I grew up in Southern California, and looking around, and I thought, man, I could never live here. It looked like a very desolate and depressing place, But over the last 10 years, Vancouver and Clark County has changed drastically, and for the better. It's become more urban. I dare say even more cosmopolitan, more diverse. And people want to live here. We all want to live here. It's a great freaking place to live. And that terrifies folks that have been here for a very long time. Change is not easy. It's very difficult. It's hard to accept. And a lot of these folks that I listen to, complain and oppose the light rail and sometimes the bridge, it sounds to me like they're just afraid of change.
Right. Do you feel like I don't know. I guess you'd have to speak to a person's state of mind. This wouldn't hold up
Hmm.
in court or anything. But when local opposition leaders, and I won't drop their name here. I think you and I know who I'm referring to, and those that
Hmm.
are in the know or in the circle will know who I'm talking about as well. But do you think those leaders in opposition are stoking this fear, this flame, to get their base riled up? And do you think that's taken a page probably out of what's going on in, national politics?
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. You're right. They're trying to scare people. I mean, I'll give you a really quick example. Even with the charter review, I was looking at a piece of literature of a individual that is running for the charter review, and you know what the role of charter review commissioner is, right? And that is to make amendments, recommendations that will eventually go to voters to change or modify our charter, which is kind of like our county's constitution.
Right.
But the piece of literature what they put on the piece of literature was no tolls, no bridges, no tolls. Well, that's not the charter review's, role,
Nope.
right? That's not your responsibility, but
No.
that's a talking point, right? And so they're out there campaigning about no tolls and no bridge when you have nothing to do with that. That is our decision at the council. That's city council, right?
Right.
In Vancouver, and so yes, it is fear because it works, right? Fear works. When you scare people, people, will take that information and run with it and utilize to make decisions. Sometimes, most of the time, when it's fear based, they're not the best decisions.
Yeah, totally. A couple nights ago, we had a charter review
Hmm.
candidate forum. There's
Hmm.
25 out of the 35 charter candidates there.
Hmm.
I spoke first.
Hmm. Oh wow, you have the lucky one.
So, yeah, which was interesting. I probably would have had a lot more to say if I went last. But I think I got my point across. And I was speaking with a local political icon, if you would. I
Hmm.
think she's in her 80s now. And I was walking her out to her car, and I
Hmm.
said, I won't say her name because I don't have permission, but I said, what do you think about, the candidates? And she
Hmm.
said, as matter of factly as she could, and when you get to be in your 80s, you can say, I think whatever the hell you want. I think that's okay, right?
Absolutely,
You get a pass.
earned
And
it.
she blatantly said, I think most of them don't even know what office they're running for, and I don't think they have any effing clue what the charter is.
I know exactly what you're talking about, Ben.
So I, and I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree with her more. I was baffled the things they want to put in. That they're saying that they can do with the charter.
Hmm.
When you tell me you've read 6 other charters and none of them had X, Y, Z, there's a reason why none of the other charters had
Hmm.
X, Y, Z because you can't put that in the charter.
Right.
And so it's been an interesting piece. And I know for you on the county council, I guess I'm a little curious
Hmm.
to know what do you see as, obviously we're going to have this November election. There's going to be 15 members on this commission,
Hmm.
and we're going to be reviewing this charter. What is it that you would expect from a charter commissioner in regards to their role?
Yeah, well, definitely spend time reviewing the charter in depth, right, line by line. As of now, I don't know that the charter has. I don't know that it requires a lot of amendments or a lot of changes, and I'll be mindful of not making any suggestions. I don't want this out there. I'll let people kind of
Yeah,
make the
absolutely.
decision. But what I expect from charter review commissioners is to really delve deep into every word of the charter, and determine, if there's anything that needs to be, and then deliberate. Really, have an engaging discussion with each other. Yes, there are opposing views. There will be opposing sides. Even though this is a nonpartisan position, it's still politics, right? People still.
It's been interesting, and I think this is going to be the third iteration or the third commission, right? To
Yeah.
be the third convening of a commission since its inception in 2014, right? And
Right.
so it's interesting talking with previous charter members the uh, the difference in the race to run for the position, how partisan it really has gotten,
Mm-hmm.
and then how these issues that aren't really partisan have become partisan because one faction has really pushed these talking points. And
Hmm.
the other night when the charter candidates were there, six or seven, maybe eight of them could have just stood up there and had one person speak, and they could have
Yeah.
just said "I," So, it was pretty clear to me that maybe they got, some type of marching orders, or they were trying to be on the same page with the same message,
Hmm.
which to me is not really what the charter is all about.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I wasn't there for the entire forum. I was on the C-Tran board, so I got there a little bit late. I think I only saw the last two candidates speak. But then I was doing my rounds, and so, but you're absolutely right. So I heard the same thing as what you experienced is that there were a group of them that one could have spoken for all of them because they had the same talking points, right? And when I see some other literature, it's the same talking points, right? One of them is, public safety, which is, again, that's a policy thing. That is not a charter thing,
Absolutely.
right? It's a public, and so they're running as if they were running for council.
Right.
That's how they're running, as if you can't solve those issues in the charter on housing or public safety.
No, I
right?
can't go into the charter and write, "Hey, we need more sheriff's officers."
Right.
Hey,
That's our decision.
I want public safety as much as the next citizen,
Absolutely.
And from what I understand, the sheriff's office, gets a pretty good piece of the budget already.
Half
So
of the budget from the general fund it goes to the sheriff, and they want more. Where are we going to get this from? So one of the things they advocate for is no taxes, but increasing, the number of officers, which we need. We need more deputies. I absolutely, completely agree, 100%.
yeah,
The council's working on that, right? But if you won't increase taxes, which I'm against, because it'll cost us too much, right? I think we're all pretty cost burdened as it is, and so the last thing we want to do with the council is increase taxes. But they don't want to increase taxes, but add more deputies. Where do you get the money from? Where do you intend to get the money from, right? Do we cut services? Do we cut the planning department, right? Do we cut community services? Do we get rid of human resources? I mean, money has to come from somewhere.
absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
And so that begs the big question, right? And I think that leads me into kind of this next point is when we're talking about the budget, at the county level, obviously the budget to you guys is proposed and written by the city manager, right? And the city
County
manager,
manager.
or the county manager,
County
sorry,
manager,
the
yeah.
county manager, is written by the county manager, and they give that to the council for approval,
Right.
right? And so, one of the things that I was curious about was, should we do an outside audit at a periodic basis? So maybe make sure that all our dollars are being accounted for.
Yeah. The great thing about Kathleen, our current county manager, is that she runs a tight ship. She really does. I mean, even I think I jokingly asked, "How about having coffee here at the council office?" She's like, "No, we don't have it in the budget." So we buy our own coffee, and I'm okay with that, by the way. I certainly said it as a joke, but she runs a tight ship. Her direct reports run a tight ship, and as I mentioned earlier, the considering how much the county has grown over the last couple of decades, the number of staff members has not increased accordingly, right?
Right.
And so the county is understaffed. We're working with 1,800 folks right now. And it's been at that level for quite some time. Is there an audit that could be done? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that any governmental agency should be audited to make sure the taxpayer dollars are spent, the way they're supposed to, and not being squandered, right, or wasted. Because I'm also a taxpayer. I don't want my money, to be just thrown away. And so I don't know that I would support it 100% right now because I don't know that there's a need. Because that becomes another cost. Now we have to find $200,000 more to find an auditor to do that. But our county manager does a great job, runs a tight ship. He has been able to manage the budget really well the last few years to make sure that we don't have a deficit. Unfortunately, that will happen in the next couple of years, right? We will be running a deficit, but we'll have to figure out how to solve that problem as we move along.
Right. And I guess with that said, there's a push, and I'd say this is a multi-partisan kind of push a little bit from both sides. Is currently the county council members are considered part-time members, right? And so there's been some talk, and even heard some charter candidates mention it the other night, was making county council full-time position. And obviously with full-time position would require, full-time pay, right? So we're talking about the budget and money and where it's coming from. If we're going to go full-time counselors, where would we get this money from to go?
Right, that's a really good question. Where do we get this money from? We have a county with over 500,000 people. And we're continuing to grow, right? We're expected to be at about 720,000 in 20 years. As it is, we do have a full plate. Most of us sit on a minimum a dozen different boards, right, or committees. So in addition to doing the council work, we have to, sit on a number of commissions. We're also backup for a number of other ones and boards. And it does take up a lot of time. I think being part-time, and I have a full-time job as well. I'm very fortunate that I have a lot of flexibility at Fourth Playing Forward to be able to do both. But there's one thing that I like to do more is spend more time out in community talking to constituents, right? But I have to manage my time accordingly. And so to answer your question, I would support that in the future. I don't know that it's necessary right now, but in the future, in several years, that might be something that, or maybe the next charter review, right? I think that people might be more amenable to it. And hopefully we won't have a deficit. We won't be running a deficit because it does cost to pay, counselors a little bit more. And I don't think it'd be much of an increase. We get our salaries are public, by the way, so we're at about $84K a year, for a part-time job, which is pretty good, to be honest with you. But it is
more than state legislators make.
No, actually, we are in lockstep with state legislators. So we just got a 9% raise. State legislators got a 9% raise. We get a 9% raise. So our salary is tied to theirs.
Okay.
And so I think it was done intentionally a while ago. But yeah, so our salary is in lockstep to theirs. The difference is that they're in session 3 months out of the year. Sure, they're working year round, but we're working year round. Every single. And my concern, though, would be that if we were to go full-time with full-time pay in the future, that there would be some counselors that would still continue to work a full-time job, right? And so one thing that I would like to see, and I think this happens with Congress people and senators, is that, excuse me, you can have like a side gig, but there's a cap as to how much you can earn, right? And I believe it's like $30,000 for a congressperson as a side gig, and so I would want that as well implemented in the charter. That if in the future, in 5-10 years, we go full time, that if you have a side gig, you don't earn more than that, so that you're not working two full time jobs. Does that make sense?
Gotcha. Yeah, totally. I mean, how could, as much as we like to think that we could work two full time jobs effectively, the truth is that you couldn't really be giving your all to either.
No, it's not, and it's hard, Ben. I can do this myself because I don't have kids. I'm single, and so I don't have other responsibilities other to myself and my community, and so I can do both my full-time job, and I spend a little bit more time, I think, than other counselors doing the work. Like you said, everywhere you go.
Everywhere. So, yeah.
I'm everywhere, and that's just where you don't see me. But yesterday,
that's just where I happen to be. Yeah, like I said, so you're plenty of places I'm not, I'm sure. So
yeah. Yesterday I was in 3 different places. And now we're here, and now we're there, and now we're there. So
yeah, totally. All right, so now we've talked about a lot of stuff. What I'm really interested in, and this is kind of a little segment, I'm starting here on season 2 of Evergreen Perspective, is, what was your holy crap, welcome to politics moment, so that moment when you're like, all right, I'm in it, like, this is it, what's going on? So what do you got?
Yeah, and it took a while for me to wrap my head around, and I know going into this role, I went into it because I wanted to make an impact, a long-term impact. Decisions that I make today will have, long-term impacts, whether it's on land use, on housing, on homelessness, etc. But it took a couple of months for me to wrap my head around that and realize, I'm like, man, like, I have this power that I'm going to use for good, right? But it took a couple of months for that to happen, after sitting in council. But I think when it really kind of hit me in the face is when I'm seeing a lot of articles about me, I'm being quoted, people recognize me out in the street, I live here in the 3rd district close to the Safeway, and somebody actually came up to me and said, hey, you're council, member Wil Fuentes. I'm like, yeah, and that was kind of cool, but, it's not what I'm used to. And then, sometimes people get personal, they attack us, right? They'll say mean things. I have never experienced racism the way I have the last 6 months. From one person. And that's what's crazy, from one person, who comes to council and express her opinion and disgust for me, and that's something that I've never experienced before, in my 46 years, never ever been attacked that way. But that's part of the process. I've developed in a very short period a thick skin, so I don't let it bother me, it doesn't sit with me. That's just part of being a politician, part of being a public figure.
Yeah, and it seems like, those voices are often the ones that are most amplified.
Yeah, they're the loudest ones, one or two people. It doesn't even take that, but they're the loudest ones, yeah.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I'm sorry that that's going on.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it, but again, I don't let it sit with me. I don't think about it. I ignore it, and that's just, and I'll probably get a lot more, as I continue to do the job, and people don't agree with me and my decisions, but that's okay. The majority voted for me, and they're okay with the work that I'm doing for now.
Right, and I think that's something. As somebody who, as myself, is stepping into the first time on a public ballot, trying to be an elected official, is same type of thing, right? Is realize that that I'm doing a lot of good, and I have always people in mind, regardless of what their beliefs are. I'm still going to stand for human rights,
Absolutely.
And so that's where I come from, and I still hear some things from time to time, and I'm just running for county charter at the moment, so it's like, oh, man, I got to toughen up a little bit or something,
Yeah.
All right, so it's kind of wrap it up today. I was just thinking about, how to wrap up. I just want to give you the opportunity. Two things. One is if we're doing this podcast again in 5 years, what do you hope we're talking about? And then, what's the one thing that you're working on right now that you hope to accomplish this year?
Yeah, well, I hope that in 5 years, if we were to do this podcast again, that the Interstate Bridge is half built, right? That we've broken ground, and it'll take about 10 years, 7 to 8 years for it to get built. So I'm hoping that it'll almost be completed. I'm hoping that more people in 5 years have had access to housing, that's affordable to them, right? One of the things that we're working on is we're looking at overlays, for example, in mobile home parks, right? So that it prevents developers from, or the owners from selling it to developers and displacing, folks that live in these communities, right? And that for some people, that's the most affordable right now. They invested in these homes 20 years ago, and that's where they intend to live out the rest of their lives. And they're under threat. So the council is working on that. I'm hoping that we can increase the number of deputies out in Clark County, because there is a need, right, for public safety's sake, that we continue preserving our open spaces and our farmland. We're working on that as well. We're not expanding the urban growth area this time around for the city of Vancouver, which is the largest one. So I'm very satisfied with that. There is talks about the city of Vancouver annexing, a big portion of unincorporated Clark County within the urban growth area. I support that. It's by law, it has to happen. There's no timeline, right? The GMA, the Growth Management Act, says it has to happen if it's within the urban growth area. When it happens, that's up to jurisdictions to decide. So I'm hoping that in 5 years we're beginning that process, right? Because it will be a big benefit to community members. Also, counties are not designed to manage urban spaces. We have about 150,000 people living in unincorporated Clark County within the urban growth area. We're just not designed. If you look at places like Salmon Creek, and Salmon Creek has done a good job, right, building it out, but there's a hodgepodge of developments, without character. But that's because, again, counties are not designed to manage these type of spaces. So anyways, so I'm hoping that that's where we are, that if we've addressed the issue with homelessness, that we have less people now, not living in homes in 5 years than we do now,
Yeah, totally.
Oh, yeah.
And then in the next 6 months, what's the one thing you hope to accomplish?
Comprehensive plan. We have to get that done. We're working
on that.
We're going to be past due, unfortunately, right? Because the councilors asked for in an agricultural land use study. And so that's going to take a lot longer than the time that we have between now and the end of the year. So we need to work on the budget. In fact, I've already got a stack a couple of days ago of I believe it's kind of a draft of the proposed budget. I haven't opened it yet. I was in council all day yesterday, but it's in my office, and I'll be looking at it within the next couple of days. So completing the comprehensive plan, making sure that within our budget, and that we have, that we move forward with hopefully solidifying, the bridge with its light rail component.
I like it.
Yeah.
Will, man, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. I really appreciate you, coming on first episode, season 2, Evergreen Perspective. And so we'll look maybe to have you on later on at some point too. But once again, I appreciate you, and I'll see you soon, I'm sure, at the next event.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Right.
See ya.
Bye, Will. All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. That's our show for the day. Really stoked with how it turned out. Really grateful for Will coming on and just answering honest and good flowing conversation. If you want to know more about Will, you can check the show notes for a link to his website. If you want to know more about Evergreen Perspective, you can do the same. If you want to see what the campaign that I'm running for, a charter commission, I'll put that link in the show notes as well. We'll see you soon. We got more great guests on the way. Hope you enjoyed first episode of season 2. And if you like, subscribe, share, let people know what's going on. If you want to see somebody else on the show, let me know. I'll see if I can get them. All right, we'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.